Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Real inspiration for real innovators. If you're looking for innovation and leadership transformation, your journey starts now.
Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Born. Well, I just wanted to let you guys know that we are now in 52 countries. That's right. Welcome to the podcast, Switzerland. Thank you guys for listening, literally from around the world. Well, my guest today is Kevin Mills. Kevin is the co-founder of Streamlined Podcasts. They are who I use for all my podcasts, and they are a full-scale podcast production agency, and they help clients edit and produce their podcasts with consistency at affordable prices. So today we're going to talk to Kevin about building a podcast brand, and I'm super excited to jump in. So welcome to the podcast, Kevin.
Hey, Natalie, I'm excited to be here, and thanks for having me on the show.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about building podcast brands, but at first, I would love to just a little bit of your backstory. You actually have been a serial entrepreneur. You've built businesses before, and I'd love for you just to share a little bit of the challenges and the good times that you've faced as a serial entrepreneur as we kick off.
Yeah, so, a lot of my friends like to say, or I've heard them say every once in a while, it seems like everything you touch turns to gold. And when they say that, it like irks a nerve in my body because I feel like they don't really know my story if they say that. Because for every one thing that I've done that's gone right and what you would call a success, there's been at least 3 failures. So that would be my first point. I don't think that there's necessarily any special recipe to success or anything like that. I think it's about consistent action with a little bit of luck. Doing that enough times over and over again, you're going to find yourself in a position to be able to see what you would call success, with whatever that is in your mind. So the majority of my career has been spent in the sales industry. I've done everything from selling vacuum cleaners door to door to radio advertisement, cars, and most recently, I spent 3 years as a mortgage loan officer, and that was a really good experience. I enjoyed it a lot, but at the end of the day, um, there's nothing like building something for yourself, and being able to basically control the rules of how things go and control how you treat your employees and how you treat your clients, and that being up to you at the end of the day. And so that's always been really, really attractive to me. And I'm really excited to be able to be doing that right now in Streamlined Podcasts with our team.
Well, that's really cool because, I just love that nobody's journey is linear. And so often we think, graduate college and just have this upward successful career, but there's all these trials and tribulations and just it's a journey. And I think the more people can realize that, the more they'll release themselves to try things and to fail fast, fail cheap, fail often. And so I just love hearing your story. So let's talk about podcasting. Let's be clear, right? 2020, when it hit, I don't remember the numbers, but it was insanity in the number of podcasts that blew up and came onto the scene. And so it's grown. Like this whole industry has grown, and many people are interested in becoming podcasters, and it's not that hard to do.
It's not. It's not. And it's what you're saying about the podcast industry growing. I don't think people really realize what's actually happening. So podcasts have actually been around for a while. They came out about 14 years ago. But like you mentioned, they really didn't pick up in popularity until 2020, really. But honestly, maybe a year or two before that is when they really started to get some traction. And now we're starting to see statistics, and you can actually go on our website and look at our blog, and we publish market statistics each and every month. And one of the most recent articles, I think there's some graphs in there where you can see radio listenership. I believe it started in 2019. Radio listenership literally on a straight downward trend into the ground, and podcast listenership doing the exact opposite. And we could sit here and theorize about a million reasons why that is, right? And one reason that I heard most recently that I thought was pretty interesting is that now it's it's easier than ever to listen to podcasts in your car, and that's traditionally where you've listened to radio before. So I think that's an interesting perspective, but I think there's a lot more to it than that. I think even more so than that is the fact that to have a radio station on AM, FM radio, especially FM radio, you kind of have to go through a lot of gatekeepers, pay a bunch of money, have a bunch of crazy equipment, etc., to make that happen. Podcasting is what we would call decentralized. There's no gatekeepers. And to be honest, anybody who has a message to share and knows a little bit about technology, or they got a little bit of money to spend, they can make a podcast happen. And so I think that's another reason that it's really taken off like it has.
I'd love for you to share a little bit about your podcast journey. I know that obviously you're co-founder of a podcast company, so you obviously have a journey here yourself with podcasting.
Yeah, great question. So that really started for me in 2019. Like I mentioned, most recently, my most recent career endeavor was as a mortgage loan officer, and it was a lot of fun. It was a great career, made plenty of money, but at the end of the day, I'm building someone else's dream, right? And I knew that I wanted more out of life, and I wanted to be a part of something bigger. And so I went to this conference in 2019 called Thrive, and basically their slogan is "Make Money Matter." And it was really, really good event. And that event even more fortified that desire to like go out there and do something, right? And so I kind of went into this mode that I've went into many times before of let me find somebody who is doing what I want to do, and let me just emulate them, and we'll go from there. And it just so happened that the person that I wanted to be like was a podcast host. And so there came the podcast bug. And so I decided that I wanted to build a thought leadership platform around motivational speaking, and thus was born Screw the Side Hustle. I ended up recording and releasing, I think it was 31 episodes in total with that podcast before I realized that I had actually already accomplished what my original goal was with the podcast. And so I decided to wind it down and focus on my business, which is Streamlined Podcasts. Like I said, I thought that the original goal was a thought leadership platform. But if we go back to that conference in 2019, what I really wanted to do was build something for myself, not build someone else's dream, and be a part of something great. And so if you'll go back and look at those episodes that I released under Screw the Side Hustle, every single one of my 3 partners in Streamlined Podcasts were people that I interviewed on that podcast.
That's awesome.
And those conversations were some of the first conversations that I had with these guys. And we've gone on to build this company together because of our, common interest. And, even more than that, we've become great friends and lifelong friends. And so, at the end of the day, like, sure, there's a lot of stuff you can use a podcast for, and we can get into that. And we've helped our clients use them for a variety of different reasons. But for me, the biggest takeaway was that it allowed me to have conversations with and to network with people that I never would have had a reason to have a conversation with in the first place. Point in case, our mutual connection, Dr. Rob McClellan.
That's right.
That guy's a legend. What reason does he have to talk to little old Kevin Mills, right? Except for a podcast interview. And then from there blossomed our business partnership.
That's so cool. Well, you know, what I love that you're leaning into is the podcast community, which is so incredible. Like, I never knew how just cool that community was, and I've done a lot of like dual releases with other podcast guests, where I've been on their show and then they've been on mine, and we've released it at the same time, and that has just been so much fun to do that kind of stuff. So they're just a really cool group of people. Lean into that a little bit more. Let's say you own a business or you're starting a business or you have a message. What is it that people should think about? What are some of the pitfalls of podcasting, of maybe the wrong reasons people get into it? What are the right reasons to start a podcast?
Great question. What's the wrong reason to start a podcast? Is because you want to be Joe Rogan. That's the wrong reason. If you want to be Joe Rogan, good luck. That's a hard game. If you want to meet some really cool people and create some leads for your business and establish yourself as a thought leader in your niche, podcasts are a great platform to use. So, with that being said, I would say if you think this is something that you might be interested in, first and foremost, what you mentioned about the community, that's a really big part about it. Realize that you're not in this alone. There are thousands of other podcasters out there who are very much a helpful community and all about sharing. People are kind of hesitant to do what you just described about doing the episode swap sometimes. And I'm like, why? It's so common at this point. There's nothing to be scared about when to ask to do that. And it can be a really effective way to share audiences.
Mhm.
And because a lot of times you're in similar niches if you're doing an episode together. So, I've used the word niche multiple times. That's another big thing is pick a niche. And that's kind of goes back to that don't be Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan's kind of all over the place, right? And he's able to do that because he's Joe Rogan and he brings some of the best experts in the world to come spend 3 or 4 hours breaking down this topic. Most people can't pull that off.
Right.
So I would highly encourage you to pick a niche, whether that is, um, you know, using keto to become the most effective entrepreneur in the world. Like that's a super specific niche, but you get the point. Get as specific as you can, because then you're going to be able to carve out that what you would call a blue ocean, and you're going to have a lot more success than kind of blasting it out to everyone. Second thing I would say would be to have a purpose, and it goes right back into that point of don't just start a podcast to have random conversations with people. There should be a purpose behind your podcast and a reason you're recording these episodes and a reason your audience is going to listen to your podcast. And then lastly, I would just say don't let analysis paralysis set in.
Ah,
That's
yeah.
super easy in this world, especially when it comes to starting the podcast, because there's so many free resources out there that you can go on YouTube, Google, figure it out. But there's so many resources out there, right? And so there's so many perspectives and different ways to do it. And so you can very easily find yourself saying, oh, I don't know what's the right way, blah, 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 and then just not do anything at all.
Yep.
My challenge to you would be that action is better than perfection.
Yeah.
And the majority of good podcasts out there, if you go listen to their first 10, 20 episodes, they're horrible.
Yeah. That's right. Myself included.
Do with that what you will.
That's awesome. I love it because, you know, I think there's something there in just getting started. And I even love the idea of just mapping it out, giving yourself a goal, saying, hey, you've got 2 months to get this off the ground. And then we're recording an episode, we're launching, we're doing this. I think you got to do it. My first episode, I probably recorded it 15 times before I made it live. But then I was like, if I don't end this with getting an episode out, like I felt like that was a failure. So it was like wherever the 15th sounds like, we're
That's
publishing
it.
it.
We're going. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just set that goal, whether it's 15 or 5 or 20, but then stick with it.
So what should people care about? I mean, I think when people start a podcast, some people are expecting Joe Rogan numbers, right? Some people are expecting a huge listenership. Like in someone's first year of podcasting, what can they expect?
Definitely don't expect Joe Rogan's numbers. Like for context, I don't think people realize how big Joe Rogan is. Like
Yeah.
for
Like the
context,
number one podcast, right?
number one podcast, but not even that, number one talk show, period. Like he's
Wow.
beating out CNN, Fox, all of them by a lot. So, I mean, you're not going to be anywhere close to him. But with that being said, it kind of depends on your niche and what kind of content and how frequently you're putting it out there. We have found that those who are publishing daily episodes typically are going to get higher downloads just because there's more content, easier to build the audience, so on and so forth. But just on an average, the average podcaster is probably the average podcaster that's putting in an effort, right? So I'm not counting the people that are just recording a podcast on their phone and publishing it on Anchor and forgetting about it and not doing any kind of editing or show notes or anything like that, right? No promotion. So a podcaster that's putting in the effort, average is probably getting 150 downloads ish per episode, 100
Wow.
downloads per episode, something like that on average. Um, so you say, well, that sounds kind of low compared to what you might find on YouTube or some other medium like that, right? Here's the difference. You've got 50,000 views on YouTube. How many of those people actually watch the entire video? Not likely that it's very high. I honestly don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but it's a pretty low percentage. Whereas with podcasting, over 80% of listeners are listening to the entire episode from start to finish. So it's
Wow.
kind of, and if we think about an episode being 30 minutes to an hour long on average, that's kind of like giving a talk at a conference.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say the average podcaster has 100 listeners. So that's basically like speaking at a conference of 100 people every week.
Yeah.
What would that do for your business if you could do that?
That's huge.
And that's, again, the average. You put in some extra effort, do daily shows, etc. It's not uncommon to be getting 2, 3, 4,000 downloads an episode, and then obviously it can go up from there. And on that note, sponsorship rates in the podcasting industry are 5x what they are in YouTube.
Wow. So say more about that.
Basically, when it comes to sponsorships on podcasts, the conversion rates are higher than any other medium as well. If you notice, there's a trend here. A lot of stuff is higher than any other medium. And I think that it has a lot to do with how unexploited podcasting is as a medium. But so when I say that, I mean maybe 5-10 years from now, that's a different story. So do with that information what you will.
Get in while you can.
Right, get in while you can. But so on average, you're going to get anywhere from $25 to $35 per 1,000 downloads per 30-second advertisement. So it's not uncommon to run 3 mid-roll ads, 1 or 2 post-roll ads. I highly suggest staying away from pre-roll ads. So say you're running 3 to 5 ads, cut it in the middle, call it 4. $30 an ad. That's $120 per 1,000 downloads on that episode. So if you do 4 episodes in a month, that's $480 if you're getting 1,000 downloads an episode. That's going to cover your production costs plus a little sum. And, at that point, you're a profitable podcast. And then as we start scaling up into 10,000, 100,000, obviously you can do the math and it can get very profitable from there. Just for context, the Daily Wire, I don't know if you're familiar with that platform. Yeah. So now they're doing like movies and things, but up until last year, it was basically just podcasts. And they're doing over $100 million a year in revenue.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But, again, don't expect to do 100 million. And I think I think there's something into what you're saying there of it can be profitable to do a podcast. At least you could break even, which that's huge, if you offer advertising. And that kind of covers the cost of podcasting in the first place.
Yeah, and to take that a step further, advertising is probably the worst way to monetize your podcast. You can get money out of your podcast or a return on investment, whatever you want to say, a lot easier than advertisement. So first off, on the subject of advertisements, if you have a very niche podcast, there are times where you could find a brand that very much resonates with your audience and niche and basically put together a package for advertisement that also includes like promotion on social media, etc. That's going to be a lot higher rate than $30 per 1,000 downloads. So someone with 150, 200 downloads can sometimes make $500 to $1,000 a month in sponsorship if they find the right brand that makes sense with their audience. So that's one thing to consider. Secondly is if you can find a way to structure the podcast in a way that it supports your business, that's going to be the easiest way to make money. So say you're a real estate developer, why are you not interviewing potential co-sponsors and other brokers, other people that you do business with? Turn your prospecting calls into interviews.
Wow.
Right? And now all of a sudden we're able to do a lot more than we ever were, and we can then repurpose that content, and we're establishing thought leadership and brand authority. And so I have seen clients create multiple six-figure businesses from using their podcast in that manner, basically interviewing their ideal prospects, and after the interview's over, that leads to a conversation, next thing you know, a deal's happened.
Wow.
And then lastly, I would say building some kind of offer to your community. So that can be done a million different ways, whether that's a course, a mastermind. What the Daily Wire did is they published their entire audio episode on iTunes. Their video episode, they published like the first 30 minutes on YouTube. The rest of it was behind a paywall. And then
Oh,
you
wow.
could interact in the last 30 minutes too. So you could ask questions and stuff. And so that's a really good way to monetize your podcast as well.
This is brilliant. So, okay, so I bet there's some people thinking, I'm ready to get started. What would you suggest? Like, what are the 2, 3, 4 steps that you would suggest when you're first coming out of the gate? You know what your message is, but you just need to get started.
So obviously the easy answer is you work with us, and I'll circle back to that. But there's literally so much free information out there at this point. Go on YouTube or Google and type how to start a podcast, and you're going to find 50 plus awesome detailed videos / guides that will walk you through the process from start to finish.
Or shameless plug, you can go to my season 1, episode 36, where it's called How to Start a Podcast as well.
There you go. That's the framework, step by step. If you need the guides, they're out there. It's on our website. If you go to our blog, we've tried to answer every question we can think of about how to start a podcast or how you should structure this and that. So there's lots of free resources out there. But if you just want to work with us and make it easy and not have to play that YouTube University game and find this and find that, we've got a product that we came out with last year that we call the Pod Box. And basically, it's everything that you need to start a podcast in one place. So what does that include? It's all of the physical tech. So it's what I'm using right now. If you're fine with how this sounds, that's what it would be. So it's this microphone, the boom arm, these headphones, all the cables, all that good stuff. And then we also have a book that's called The Easiest Way to Start a Podcast, and it's included in this. It's really short. It's like 40 pages. You could read it on a plane ride. It tells you everything you need to know, nothing you don't need to know about starting a podcast. Because again, we handle a lot of the intricate back end stuff
that
you don't really have to worry about that you would if you were doing all of the publishing and stuff yourself. So it has that guide. And then we're also actually going to give you access to our team to help you create all the digital assets that you need to show up like you should. So on your podcast, right, if you go to Spotify or iTunes, there's that cover art, right?
Yeah.
So we'll help you design one of those. Then additionally, we're going to create your intro and outro music. So that's the audio bumpers that play at the beginning and end of every single episode. And then we're also going to provide a hosting platform for you. So every podcast basically lives on a server, and iTunes and Spotify goes and pulls it from that server. And so normally you'd have to go to Libsyn, Buzzsprout, Captivate, whatever, and find one of those and set all that up. We've partnered with Libsyn Pro to be able to offer that to all of our clients. And so we can get that set up for you, and that's included in the pod box. And then we're also going to provide post-production. So all of your editing, show notes, publishing, graphic design for 120 minutes of content. So all of that stuff, and it's $497. So in my opinion, that's a steal. If you were to try to source that in the open market, you're not going to come anywhere close to that price point.
Crazy.
And we would love to give one of those away to your audience, actually. So in the show notes, there will be a link that you guys can click on to sign up for a giveaway there. And we're not trying to market to you or anything like that. We're just collecting your email for the giveaway. There will be a checkbox that you can check if you want to get more information from us, but you certainly don't have to. So yeah, that's the pod box.
That is awesome. Well, I just love this. I would love, as we're thinking about people who are inspired and interested now in starting a podcast, I would love for you to just leave us with a few final thoughts on things we could think about when building a podcast brand.
I would just say that if you're not using a podcast right now to network, to drive more leads into your business and to build thought leadership or brand awareness, you might regret it 3 years from now. Podcasting's here to stay, and the exponential growth has just begun. It's going to get interesting.
That's awesome. Well, if I can just put a plug in here for you guys, I have 3 different podcast platforms. The one we're listening to now, Innovation Meets Leadership. I have a platform that I'm the host of called Thrive Today, and then also a Work Forward podcast. And I do all my podcasting through you guys because it's just so simple. There's not a whole lot I have to think about. And obviously there's no way I could do 3 podcasts doing all the editing and I wouldn't even know where to start. So how long?
I wouldn't either. Yeah. That's why I have a great team.
Right. So it's been 2 years, I want to say, that I've been with you guys, about a year and a half, 2 years.
Next month is our official 2-year mark.
Yeah, there we go. So from the beginning, and it's been an awesome experience.
Cool. Well, I appreciate those kind words, Natalie, and we're very proud to be your partners in the post-production side of your podcasting journey.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for your time today. This has been so fun. And I'm telling you, like, I personally picked up some tips on just, again, on the advertising side and just how to monetize a podcast and continue to build a brand. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Thanks, Natalie.
Well, to our listeners, thank you for joining the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Remember, don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.
Thank you for joining us for the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our show on iTunes. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Innovation Meets Leadership, and visit our site at innovationmeetsleadership.com for more innovation resources.